Okay, so on behalf of the Mass Mortgage Bankers Association, thank you so much for joining us to goal setting. What could be better way to start off 2025 than to get us ready for goal setting and planning? And so we are very grateful for Arch MI for providing us with this wonderful seminar. And I am going to introduce and hand it off to Lou Chinappi. Everyone knows Lou. But for me, I have known Lou for years. He has been a past chair of the association and a wonderful resource to the MMBA. So, Lou, I'm turning it over to you.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you, Deb, and we appreciate the opportunity to offer you this today. And I'm really excited we were able to get Blaine to teach the class today. His schedule is very full, so it really worked out well that we were able to do this. And I know once he completes this training, he's going to be jumping on a plane to do more training. So Blaine, thanks for coming, and I just wanted to introduce Blaine and tell you a little bit about his credentials. His career started in 1985, and he's a senior national trainer and instructional designer for Arch MI. So what that means is he trains all over the country, and he's also very active in designing the training programs that we offer here at Arch MI. In 2005 and 2022, he received America's Greatest Thinker Award, which is just so impressive to me, Blaine. I appreciate the fact that we have you on our team here, and I know you're a publisher, and you also hold the highest designation of a speaker, which is a certified a CSP, and I'm not sure what that stands for, but I'll let you jump in and tell us that. But with that, I'm going to hand it over to Blaine, and we'll talk today about 5 steps to better goal setting. Thanks, Blaine.
Okay, well, thank you, Lou, and good morning, everybody. I am so happy that you've decided to invest a little bit of time in yourself, and it's something that I think we don't do often enough. And so I always really value the fact that folks have other choices as to how to spend their time, and yet you've decided to spend roughly an hour with me this morning, and I take that responsibility really seriously. So let me just set the stage for you a little bit. I'm always a little hesitant to talk about things that I feel like people need to discover for themselves. An example would be time management. I am often asked if I can present a seminar on time management, and my response is always the same: no. And the reason that I don't believe that I should present a seminar on time management is because, first of all, what works for me may not work for a lot of other people. How we all structure our days and what kind of systems and processes we use are something that we have to figure out. So this is kind of a similar topic, right? I mean, you all know how to set goals. You all know how to make plans. So what value can I bring to this topic? And so my intention is to give you ideas, to give you food for thought, not to tell you that there's this one way that you should do something. Now, I will walk through 5 steps, and these 5 steps are simply a way of kind of organizing a plan from the conception of the goal to how do we actually get it done. But I'm not going to be telling you all the tactics and the specific processes and all the things that you need to do. Instead, I'm going to be sharing with you concepts and ideas and some of the pitfalls and some of the challenges that I have certainly experienced myself, and I'm sure you have as well when it comes to trying to achieve something that's important to you. Now, having said that, we're at the time of year when a lot of people have made New Year's resolutions. And even if you're not a New Year's resolution kind of person, you've probably been thinking about this year and anticipating it actually for probably several weeks. And so I want you to think about a goal that you have. Maybe it's short term, something that'll be accomplished, in the next few months or in 2025, or maybe it's a bucket list kind of goal. But I want you to be thinking about one as we walk through the content today so that you can actually apply the ideas that I'm sharing with you to this goal that's important to you. Now, if you don't have one off the top of your head, I can tell you that the 3 main categories of goals that people usually have in their life either involve health, something that's health related, wealth, something that's financially related, or happiness, things that, whether that's family or community or things or whatever it is that makes a person happy. So health, wealth, and happiness tend to be the things that kind of drive people when they're thinking of goals. But I want you to be thinking about one that's important to you. Again, short term or long term doesn't matter, because as we walk through these ideas, I want you to try them on for size, apply them to this goal that's important to you. And my objective would be that I've given you some things to think about and that you've got a couple of key takeaways by the end. The content is going to be very straightforward. You're not likely going to have questions about what I'm sharing, but if you do, don't hesitate to either put it in the chat, or I will pause periodically and you're welcome to come off of mute and talk if you'd rather do that. But sit back and relax. I mean, just make this investment in you. Try to resist the urge to multitask and look at your emails and your social media accounts and all that stuff that we do when we're on a webinar, because I don't know what idea is going to resonate for you, but I'm pretty sure I'm going to say something or share something that could be actually really important, could actually be a game changer for you. But of course, if you're not paying attention and you miss it, then you won't get the benefit of that information. All right. So let me start with some perspective. This quote from Dwight Eisenhower is actually from before he was president. You may know that Dwight Eisenhower was a general, and as a general, he coordinated the Allied invasion of World War II. So talk about a plan, right? Anybody that's a student of history knows, that D-Day invasion was a thing. And it, of course, did not go as planned, even though the result ultimately was successful. And so Dwight Eisenhower is kind of famous for this quote that goes along the lines of, plans are nothing, planning is everything. And if you look at our business, I could probably share with you at least a dozen or 24 predictions from all kinds of economists, the MBA, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, our own economists at Arch. I could share with you a lot of predictions about what they all say the mortgage market will look like in 2025. And this happens every year, right? We get these predictions, we build sales plans, we build individual goals, compensation structures. We spend a lot of time in our industry trying to get our hands around what's the market going to look like, and then we plan accordingly. As long as I've been in this industry, I'm not sure I've ever seen a year that plays out the way that everybody predicted, right? I mean, not only are the predictions all over the map, but do they even happen the way that people predicted? Not likely. And so that does kind of make us think, why bother? Like, why go through this process? Why spend all this time making plans when it's not likely going to go as planned anyway? The key to this quote is that it's not the plan that's important, it's the planning. It's the thinking through the steps that I'm going to share with you today. That's where the value is. So don't get too hung up on any given plan, but don't dismiss the importance of making a plan. I also want to share with you, before we get into these 5 steps, kind of some common challenges, some common themes around goal setting. And I'm going to say some things that are kind of contrary to conventional wisdom. And you don't have to agree with me. All right. I'm not here to sell you on what I believe. But I do want to just, again, stimulate some thinking and get you thinking about some ideas that perhaps you haven't thought about before. And so one of the things I think is really important with goal setting is that we actually step back a minute and ask ourselves, why is this even important? So if you're thinking about that goal that you have that I suggested you be thinking about, to what end is that important to you? And is it really important to you, or is it important to somebody else? I mean, that's the thing about intention. Our intention is our why. And if we're not clear on what our why is, we're often doing things that are based on other people's whys, right? And so I think before we dive into trying to accomplish something, we need to step back for a minute and just ask ourselves, why is this important to me? And is it important enough to do the things I'm going to have to do to accomplish it? What might the sacrifices be that I'm going to have to make? And am I willing to make those sacrifices? And I think sometimes we forget this step. And so we dive into something and we immediately start to have a struggle because we're not clear on what is our real intention here. And then I also hear all these thoughts out there, from goal setting gurus about putting stuff in writing. I'm not here to dismiss that idea, But I think there's a problem with the focus on making sure you put your goals in writing. And you'll hear ridiculous statements being made, like if you put your goal in writing, you are 36.7% more likely to achieve it. Well, first of all, I'd love to know where they even come up with this data, right? I mean, what's that number based on? I don't know that there's any goal, and I've achieved a lot, right? If you go back over the course of your life, you will see that you have achieved a lot. I don't know that there's any goal that I've achieved that I've ever put in writing. Now, if putting it in writing, if you find that to be helpful, well, then by all means do it, right? I'm not saying you shouldn't do it, but here's what I'm saying we shouldn't do. We shouldn't put it in writing and put a little sticky note on our bathroom mirror or put a little index card on our visor in our car so that we see it 5 times a day, and then just make the assumption that because I've written it down and I look at it several times a day, I'm halfway there. Right? Which kind of leads to the next thing, which is affirmations. The idea that because I have affirmed that I have achieved this thing already, right? We're always told with affirmations, say it in the present tense, like you've already done it. Let's make this a practical example. Come spring, when the grass starts to grow, go out into your lawn, and if you don't have a lawn, just go out into a park in your neighborhood and stand in the middle of all that grass and affirm there will be no weeds. There will be no weeds. There will be no weeds in 2025. And you see the ridiculousness of what I'm saying. As you stand there saying that there will be no weeds, they are growing up around your feet. In other words, the problem that I have with this idea of writing it down and making affirmations is that sometimes we get fooled into this comfort that because we've done those things, we're already making progress. Now, is there some truth to the fact that if you put something out into the universe, that suddenly some things start to happen that might help you get what you desire? Maybe, I don't know. I'm not an expert on that stuff. But I believe it's the actions that we take. It's the things that we do that get us the result, right? Standing on the start line of a marathon saying that you've completed a marathon is not the same as actually running a marathon, right? So I think you get the point. I'm not saying that these are bad things to do. I'm just saying don't do these things and think that you're halfway there, because the work is really what's required. Now, as we're trying to do the work, it's hard to stay focused. I'm not going to put these words up on the screen, but I'm just going to call them out for you. I have 3 words for you that are the reasons why we have a challenge in staying focused. The first is distractions. You may be experiencing that right now, right? We have things coming at us all the time from all directions, and our ability to concentrate and focus for a prolonged period of time on just one thing is becoming harder and harder. I don't have a solution for you other than when you need to focus on one thing, then you need to limit the distractions that are preventing you from doing it. But I do think it prevents us from achieving a lot because we drift. And I'm going to talk about that more in a second. The second word that I want to call out is multitasking. And I will invite you to do your own research on this. You don't have to believe this guy Blaine from Chicago. Multitasking is a myth. That's not actually how our brains work. How our brains work is that we give primary focus to one thing at a time. So when we're doing more than one thing at a time, our primary focus is actually just shifting from one thing to another thing. We're not giving primary focus to 4 things at a time. We can only give primary focus to one thing at a time. So really, we should change that. We should change that word. We should stop saying multitasking and we should say multi-switching. And when we think of it that way, it doesn't sound as appealing, right? I mean, multitasking sounds like, oh, look at me spinning 5 plates at the same time. Multi-switching implies I'm constantly going from one thing to another thing. And what research is finding now is that it's not productive. In fact, some people have suggested that if you want to increase your productivity by up to 40%, I mean, think about that for a minute, increasing your productivity up to 40%, then we need to minimize multi-switching or multitasking because that's what's preventing us from being productive. Okay, again, you don't have to, I'm not selling you a bill of goods here, so do your own research if you're skeptical about these ideas, but I think what I'm sharing with you is at least what I believe to be truthful. The other thing about goal setting is that, of course, you're going to have to review and adjust because the circumstances out there in the world are shifting constantly. And so that's what we're always doing in our business, right? We're always shifting our approach, our goals, our compensation structures, all those things that are changing in the marketplace require that we also adjust in terms of our own strategies. And if I really am honest with myself about anything that I've accomplished that I am really proud of having accomplished, and I ask myself, how did I do that? How did this middle-aged guy from the Midwest achieve this thing? It really, for me, comes down to two words. I had at least some belief that I could. Now, I'm not saying I had ultimate confidence, right? I'm not saying that the first time I ran a marathon, I was standing at the starting line thinking, I got this, right? No, a first-time marathoner is actually probably a little petrified about what they're about to step into. But I at least had a belief that I could. I believed it was possible. And then the persistence of just not stopping, right? This goal is important to me. I will continue to make progress and work toward the goal. I'm not going to stop. I'm not going to quit. Now, sometimes that's exactly what you need to do. Right. So I'm not saying that there should be any shame in giving up on something, because that can actually be a very difficult decision to realize this is no longer important to me, or the sacrifices required to achieve this goal are too great. I'm not willing to pay that price. There are times when we do need to stop. But if you look back at things that you've accomplished, you'll probably see that same trend that I'm explaining. You had a belief that you could, and you kept at it. Okay, so that's a lot of kind of, overview. I just got a couple of more things before we dive into the 5 steps. My friend John Blumberg, who actually lives not that far from me in the Chicago area, he works with companies on core values. And he has this idea about drifting that I think is completely appropriate to what we're talking about today. I think our natural tendency is to have an intention to say, I'm going to go do this, right? And over time, we drift. We either drift from the goal itself or the activities that we need to do to accomplish the goal. We start drifting from some of those. And so what we need in our lives, I believe, are drift catchers. We need people personally and professionally who know us and respect us enough that they will mention this to us, right? When they notice this trait in us, they will call it out. And we know and respect them enough that rather than getting all defensive and, hurt by it, which honestly, it's hard not to be, but we'll listen. We'll listen to what they have to say, because what they're noticing is that we're drifting from our intention, that we're drifting from the things we said were important to us, or we're drifting from the steps we said we'd take. And we need those people in our lives because the natural tendency is to drift, right? Okay, hopefully I've already given you some food for thought, right? And again, if there's anything about what I've shared with you so far that you have a question about, or a disagreement, a comment, feel free to put that in the chat. Debbie's going to be periodically letting me know if there's anything there that I need to address. And if you would rather just unmute and say something, you're welcome to do that as well. But having said all of that, let's get into these 5 steps. Now, some of what you're going to hear here is basic, fundamental, like 101 level course, right? This is a 101 level course. In fact, I'm going to suggest that the first 3 steps of these 5 are basic, fundamental, no-brainers. We're going to cover those quickly. The last 2, however, aren't something that we often give thought to. And so we'll spend a little bit more time on those. And again, my plan here is not to say, here's this structure you must follow, right? You need to figure out what works for you. But I do think that kind of looking at goal setting and planning through the lens of these 5 steps could be useful. So whatever ideas work for you, use them. Whatever ideas don't work for you, pitch them to the side, right? The other thing I should say this, just because I don't want anybody to feel that I've got a bad intention here. As an example for each of these 5 steps, I'm going to equate that step or show how that step works with the goal of weight loss. And the only reason that I'm using the goal of weight loss as an example is because it's something that probably all of us have some familiarity with, right? We either ourselves at one point in our life have wanted to lose a little or a lot of weight, or we know someone who has gone through that. And so it's something that we can relate to. I'm not using weight loss as an example to minimize the challenge, the legitimate challenge that many people have with this. And so I don't want it to trigger anybody. I'm not using it as to poke fun at it. I'm just using it as an example because I thought it was something that we could kind of all relate to. So hopefully you'll take it in that spirit and you won't feel any negative feelings as I kind of highlight that as we go. So what's step one? Step one is the goal. Fundamental, right? What's the destination? It's kind of like plugging an address into your GPS, right? My destination is this thing out there somewhere. It could be a short-term goal. It could be a long-term goal. There's lots of information out there from goal-setting gurus who will tell you certain things about how to structure a proper goal. Again, I think you have to take people's advice and make it your own. I will just say this about most goals. They should be specific. And the reason I say they should be specific is so that you could actually measure it and know if you did it. Right? So, I mean, I might have a goal of, I'd like to be a better father. A worthy goal, right? To be a better father. But how will I know if I've accomplished that, right? I probably need to be more specific. So how could I make that more specific? I'd like to have more patience at home. Okay, so we've made it a little bit better, right? And we've gone from being a better father to having more patience at home, but you see it's still kind of problematic here, right? I mean, I guess you could ask your family members if that's been achieved, but that's still kind of vague, right? So I'm going to say that most goals need to be specific and most goals need to have some type of deadline or some type of time frame. Otherwise, it's really more of a wish, isn't it? I mean, if you said to yourself, someday I'd like to travel to fill in the blank, someday I'd like to visit Australia. I mean, that is a goal in a way, but you're not really driven to do anything about it if it's just kind of this someday, maybe out there some way. And now some goals start that way. I've had lots of goals that start with, I'm going to do that, but I don't know when, I don't know how, right? But I know I'm going to do that. And then over time, I start to be able to see the when and the how, and it becomes clearer, right? So again, this is kind of like fundamental, but at the same time, it's a thing we really need to think about. So what is the goal? That's step one, okay? So here's an example. If we're going to just use weight loss an example, and again, I mean no disrespect by talking about this subject. It's actually one of my goals this year. I'd love to lose some weight and keep it off. It's not a thing that's been easy for me over my adult life. If you had a goal of, I'm going to lose 30 pounds in 3 months, that kind of meets the definition that I just said, right? It's specific and there's a time frame. So that would be a goal that I would say, yes, it meets that definition, as opposed to, I'd love to lose some weight someday, right? You see the difference? Okay, this is basic stuff. So let's go to the next step. The next step is to take a look at, well, then what is your present reality? So if we look at that GPS example, if the goal is the destination, the reality is, where are you now? Which is what we do with a GPS, right? We don't just say, I want to go to this place. The GPS also is aware of where we are right now, so it can show us the way, right? If we don't know where we're at right now, if we don't do a reality check, the goal might actually be something that's not attainable or not reasonable. So this isn't about raining on your parade. This is about making sure that this is something that is, as you start to put the steps in the plan together, that this is something that can actually be done. So again, if we look at weight loss as an example, most people who are knowledgeable on this subject would say that safe and effective and sustainable weight loss is no more than 1 to 2 pounds a week. In fact, really probably closer to the 1 pound mark, which means if we go back to that goal of 30 pounds in 3 months, that's not likely achievable. Now, could it be done? Could a person lose 30 pounds in 3 months? Absolutely. But that's probably not the healthy way to go about it. It's probably not a sustainable way to go about it. I have twice lost 20 pounds in a month. Well, I was walking across Spain. One time I walked 550 miles and another time I walked, 650 miles. And I mean, there's just no way when you're walking, 8 to 10 hours a day for a month straight that you're going to not lose weight, right? So yeah, I could say, oh, I lost 20 pounds in a month, but I mean, that would not be a normal goal to set for yourself unless you're going to walk 500 or 600 miles in that month, right? So what this does is it helps us refine the goal. So we could change either part of that goal. We could change the amount, we could change the specificity of it, or we could change the time frame, right? So if 30 pounds in 3 months is really not a great goal in terms of it's not that good of a reality for most people, then we could change based on, well, what's more important? Well, my doctor said I need to lose 30 pounds for my health. So if 30 pounds is important, maybe I need to extend the time frame. Or if the more important thing is, no, in 3 months, there's a wedding, there's a reunion, there's something that I need to have less weight when I get there. Well, then the 3 months is important, but maybe we back off on the 30 pounds because it's just probably not reasonable, right? Okay, so see, again, these are not like complicated, but these are the steps that if we don't do them, we just start plowing forward into trying to achieve something. And our chances of success are not as great if we haven't looked at these first two steps. So the first is to establish the goal, to hopefully have it be specific and bound to some sort of time frame. The second step is to look at your present circumstances, your present reality, so you can see the distance between where you are and where you're going and make sure that that seems reasonable, right? Let's get to step 3. And this one is even optional. In other words, you don't even always have to do step 3. But step 3 for me is about accountability. And accountability, as I look at it, comes in a couple of different forms. One could simply be those drift catchers we talked about earlier, right? Other people that know about this goal that's important to you that will help you when you start to drift or get off course, right? Or help could also be in the form of, have other people achieved this thing? Have other people done it? When I did my first walk across Spain in 2018, I had a very aggressive plan. I was going to do this walk my plan was to do 500 miles in 26 days. And the reason it was 26 days was because that's all I had. I only had 26 days that I could do this, and I wanted to do the whole thing, which was 500 miles, but I only had 26 days. And when I shared that with people, most of them said, that's not enough time, Blaine. That's not reasonable. 26 days to walk that far. It's not reasonable. But I found people who had done it, right? I found people who had posted online their experience of doing it in 26 days. So I at least had a roadmap. Now, that doesn't mean that I can do what they did, but at least gave me a sense of, okay, it's been done. There's been somebody that's done this thing, and they've done it in kind of the way that I wanted to do it. What can I learn from them? So that's the other thing about accountability. It's not just people chiming in to tell you that you're off track. It's being inspired and learning from people who already know what you're trying to figure out. And you can shorten your learning curve. If somebody is an expert, right? I mean, many of you are experts in your field. If you wrote a book about everything that you know, and I could sit down and read that book in a few hours and get all that information that it took you 20 years to figure out, wouldn't that be valuable for me if I was just starting in this industry to learn everything that it's taken you 20 years to learn, and I can read all that in a few hours? So there's no shortage of information. The actual challenge is figuring out what information is valuable for you, right? There's no shortage of other people who've done what you want to do, and they've told you how they did it, but you still have to figure out what works for you. So again, if we go back to the concept of weight loss, what this looks like is asking yourself if you know people that have done this successfully, right? And do you need a drift catcher, right? Do you need somebody on your team, so to speak, that's going to help you when you get off course? Okay. Hopefully this is making total sense. These first 3 steps The third one in particular is kind of optional. Not every goal needs accountability. But let's move into the stuff that's a little more challenging. Strategies, the first S. This is how do we get it done, right? So I've got the goal. I've taken a look at where I am presently. The goal seems reasonable. I've figured out what information I need or what help I need. Who are the other people? That's basically what accountability is about. Who are the other people that need to be part of this goal? But now I have to figure out how to do it, right? There's some challenges here. Again, if we look at weight loss, there's no shortage of strategies, right? I mean, there's all kinds of things. We all know what the formula is, right? You could eat better, you could eat less, you could exercise more, you could get better quality sleep. We all know that these are things that could be done to help us achieve losing weight. So the challenge is not, can you find this information? The challenge is figuring out what's appropriate for you and what will work for you. Well, that's for you to figure out, right? I can't tell you how to do that, but what I can share with you are 3 mistakes. I can share with you 3 struggles that I believe we all have in common when it comes to strategies. And the first is that we have way too many, right? I mean, just go back to this list for a second. Yep, starting tomorrow, I'm going to do all that stuff. Yeah, right. I mean, how long is that going to be sustainable, right? I mean, to make that many changes in my lifestyle all at once, and we wonder why we stop. We wonder why we don't succeed. That doesn't work well for us to do all that stuff all at one time. Having too many strategies is a common problem. If you're trying to increase the amount of business that you do this year, right? The market is going to be what the market is. And a lot of people are saying, yeah, probably a lot like last year. There's not a ton of positive news out there when it comes to things like interest rates and inventory levels and right. So I need more business. I want to do more business. So I'm going to do 10 things differently this year, starting tomorrow. I mean, good luck. I wish you well, but I just think it's too many. So the late Stephen Covey has this quote that I really appreciate about prioritizing. We're very good at prioritizing, but we're not as good at scheduling our priorities. And here's what that really means to me. If scheduling our priorities is what we need to do, then we can't have too many of them, right? You can't schedule a ton of stuff. So right away, you start to shrink your priorities when you realize you have to schedule them, right? That's what I love about that quote. Here's a couple more. If you have more than 3 priorities, you don't have any. Okay, Jim Collins, another business guru. 3, Jim, where'd you come up with that? It's kind of an arbitrary number, but the point is we shouldn't have too many, right? And I absolutely love this quote about it's not that we have too little time to, do what we need to do. It's that we feel the need to do too much in the time we have. Oh, hey, guilty as charged, man. That describes my life. If there's one thing that probably, I would say drives my wife crazy, but it probably doesn't drive her crazy. It's probably just something that she has a hard time understanding about me, is why am I constantly filling my schedule and my bandwidth with so much? It's like I've got an addiction. We all have addictions of some kind, right? And one of my addictions is I'm interested in doing way too many things simultaneously. And so I'm constantly filling my schedule with all kinds of things that many of which are not priorities, many of which are not directed towards my most important goals. So it's really more of a mindset shift, right? Do we really need to do all the stuff we're doing? Food for thought. Okay, that's strategy mistake number 1. Here's number 2. The strategies are too similar to what we're already doing. If you take a look at your daily habits, the daily routine, that's what produces the results we have, right? What we do, the actions we take, produce results. So if what we're talking about is changing results, don't we have to change what we're doing? We've all heard some quote along the lines of, You can't expect a different result by doing the same things, right? If we want a different result, we have to do different things. I mean, you could just work harder. I mean, that could be a strategy, right? So I'll sleep less. I'll eat one meal a day. I'll work like 16 hours a day. Could that increase your production? Could that increase your results? It could. I mean, I'm not suggesting that that's a great way to go about it. And how long could you do that? You know, how long could you go with hardly sleeping and not getting adequate nutrition? So we need to pick goals. We need to pick strategies that are different enough from what we're already doing. And here's the thing, some are going to work and some aren't. You just don't know until you try it, right? So a lot of times, at least for me, I don't want to pick a strategy until I know it's going to work, right? Because I don't want to fail. I don't want to do something that's going to be unsuccessful. But at the same time, how do I know it's going to be successful or not if I haven't done it yet? All right, here's strategy mistake number 3. We'll actually put strategies into our plan that are things that we don't want to do. We're basically motivated as human beings to increase pleasure and to decrease pain. I mean, it's just a fundamental human trait. We want more pleasure, less pain. And yet we'll tell ourselves we're going to do stuff that's painful. Not for very long. I mean, willpower, there's some conflicting research on this, but some people believe that willpower is kind of like a battery that, you know, you use willpower and you're draining that battery. You only have so much of it, which is one of the reasons why when we say we're going to do all these things different, we very quickly drain that willpower battery, and all of a sudden we can't sustain that any longer. And then we often swing all the way back to doing all the things we were doing before, right? Now, why do I have this picture? You may be wondering, what's with this picture? This is kind of an odd picture for this point I'm making. It's because I had a gentleman come up to me after I had shared this idea in a seminar, and he said, Blaine, I'm really struggling with this idea about not doing things that you don't want to do. Because I teach youth sports. This is what he's telling me. I teach youth sports. And the only way that those kids are going to get better at the sport is to do drills, which they don't want to do. They hate the drills. They just want to play the game, right? They just want to go out there and do the thing. But the only way they're going to get any good at it is by doing the drills. And so I'm having trouble understanding. You're saying don't do stuff that's painful, but I don't know how to help them get better. So really good question, right? So I thought about it for a minute, and this is my response. First of all, there's no doubt that when you try something new, you're not going to be good at it, and that immediately is painful. And so sometimes our tendency is, I don't want to do that anymore, right? I quit. Maybe this happened to you. Maybe you have children that this has happened to. They want to try a sport. They want to play an instrument. And of course, they don't immediately succeed. And so sometimes we as the parent or the adult might even push them a little bit, like, you know, hey, you need to give this some time, right? You need to try to push through this initial discomfort, which I totally in agreement with. But I also know from personal experience that if you truly do not like doing something, and you've got parents pushing you to do it because they're telling you you just have to get through the discomfort, there will reach a point in time when your desire to quit only gets bigger, right? In other words, there are times when what we need to do is not that thing, right? And so the question that I posed to this gentleman that was talking to me was, let's stick with the sports metaphor here. Think of an athlete who has reached the top of their profession. So maybe it's an Olympian, a world champion, somebody in any sport that has reached the top. Would they have reached the top? Would they have put themselves through all the repetitions, the 10,000 hours of practice, if they found that to be painful? The answer is obviously no. I'm not saying the pain at the beginning when you're not good at it, but at some point, if you don't find some pleasure in going through the reps, right, you're not going to do them. You're not going to put in that much time and that much effort if there's no joy in that. Even if you want the destination, you want the thing at the end. I want to be the best. I want to be a world champion. That's not enough to get you through what it's going to take to get there if there's not some enjoyment in that process. So that's really my main point. Don't say that one of your strategies is that you're going to make cold calls, that you're going to call people that you have absolutely no relationship with whatsoever, just in the odd chance that they might have a need for what you do. If you'd rather have surgery without anesthesia than make cold calls, right? Now, some people enjoy making cold calls. It's kind of a game. It's fun, right? Well, then by all means, make cold calls. But if you're one of those people that absolutely hates that idea, then don't have that as part of your strategy, right? We do this. We do this stuff. I know it's kind of like a mind thing. Okay, so here's the last step. This might be the hardest. This might actually be the most important thing you hear today. For much of my life, and maybe it's a life stage thing, right? So maybe it's different when you're younger. Maybe it's different when you're just starting out at something. But for much of my life, I've always thought that achievement is about addition, more, put more on my plate, put more in my calendar, work more. And what I've discovered over time is that at some point, our bandwidth is taken up, right? So how do we add more to an overflowing plate? Then we end up doing everything at a level that we're unhappy with because we're not doing anything at the level we could because we're doing too many things, right? So the last step is to assess not what do you need to do, but what do you need to stop doing? What is preventing you from either doing the things you know you should be doing, or what is the stuff you're doing that's not helpful? It's not getting you closer to your goal, right? So again, if we just go back to the weight loss example for a second, what's preventing us from doing all those things we know we could do? What's preventing me from eating better? What's preventing me from eating less? What's preventing me from exercising more? What's preventing me from getting more sleep? It's another way of looking at this. Instead of what do I need to do, it's what do I need to stop doing that's preventing me from doing the stuff I need to do, right? I mean, we're all very good at to-do lists. My wife has a habit. I love this habit that she has. There's a certain satisfaction you get when you cross something off a to-do list, right? I mean, we're old school. She writes stuff down on a piece of paper, but maybe you use a gadget, a device of some kind. Sometimes she will put something on the list that she's already done so she can have the satisfaction of crossing it off, right? I mean, I think that's so cool. So we're familiar with that, but are we familiar with a let go list? Do we do that as readily? And why don't we do that? Because we think it's all important. Everything's important. Everything I do is important. Everything on my calendar is important. All of my commitments, they're very important. Oh, I mean, I can't tell a person what they can and can't do or should or shouldn't do, but I remember as a child, I grew up very poor, just my mom and I for most of my childhood. And, we were on food stamps and I was the kid in school on the free lunch program. And, we would go shopping and we'd get to the register. It was before you had self-checkout, and they'd be adding everything up. And I would realize we don't have enough money. We're not going to have enough money to pay for all these things. So you know what that's like. You're standing in line at the grocery store and somebody has to start putting things back. I can't buy that. We need to put that to the side. Well, what do you put back? It's all important. The milk's important. The meat's important. The bread's important. We think everything's important. So we have to, unfortunately, let go of some things that we care about. That's kind of the unfortunate reality. And that's why it's hard. It's hard to let go. Now, see, here's the cool news, though. Sometimes it's just temporary. In other words, if let's say I'll use running since that's something I'm familiar with. You've got a goal that you want to run a marathon. You've never run a marathon. You want to run a marathon. Well, to train adequately to run a marathon, if you're already at least a casual runner, you should give yourself several months. So you're going to have to stop doing some other things, especially on the weekends, so that you can have time to adequately train and start running longer and longer. But once you run the marathon, you might decide, okay, I've done that. I can cross it off my list. I don't need to do that anymore. And you can go back to doing the things that you used to do on the weekends because now you've accomplished that goal. So sometimes these things that we're going to stop doing, it's not like forever, but we still need to stop doing them at least for a while. And this question of what not to do is going to come up constantly because sure enough, you'll make a commitment. Instead of watching a bunch of TV on the weekend, I'm going to do more exercising because I've got this goal, right? And the goal requires that I do more exercising. So I'm going to stop watching so much Netflix and streaming services, and I'm going to spend more time on the weekend exercising. And then somebody comes up to you and says, oh my gosh, I just binge watched this thing and it's amazing. It's only 10 episodes. You could get through the whole thing in a weekend, but it will change your life. You have got to see this program. And so then what we need to ask ourselves is, okay, by doing that, by making that choice, is it moving me forward toward my goal, or is it a distraction? You still have the power of choice, right? I mean, you can still decide, forget the exercising this weekend. I'm going to watch that cool thing that my friend said will change my life, right? We always have the choice, but at least asking ourselves before we immediately dive into that thing that's going to distract us from our goal, let's ask ourselves if that's really what we're doing. Those things come up all the time, don't they? People want you for this. People want you to do volunteer work. I mean, when you're a talented, hardworking person, there are lots of people who are going to want you for various things. And the hardest thing sometimes is saying no and saying, no, I'm sorry, I can't give more of myself to that because I have to have enough available for this other thing that's important to me. So here's just some additional quotes that I found that I thought you might find useful. Some of them I know who the authors are, so I gave them attribution. Other times, you go online and you see that this thing has been said by 4 people, and so there's no way of knowing who said it first. But here's a Tony Robbins quote about, if you're not taking any action on your decision, did you really make a decision? That's about as straightforward as it can get. Here's one I really like. A step in the wrong direction is better than no step at all, right? I so appreciate the second part of that statement because that's me as well. I will often not take action because I'm not clear that that's what I should do. But it would be the taking of the action that would give me the clarity that I'm looking for. So it's kind of like I'm paralyzed. I'm not going to move because I don't know for sure that that's the movement I should make. But at the same point in time, if I don't make a move, how do I gain clarity on if that's a good move or not? I mean, so much of this, you're probably figuring this out. So much of this, it's really in the mind, right? Every decision against something, the good news is it means it's for something else. Right? So the pain of letting go, yes, there's pain in letting go of something, but that means you're choosing yes to something else. And maybe that's what we should focus on. Here's a few more thoughts. Stephen Pressfield, he actually has this book called Resistance. It's a short, easy read. I would recommend it. It talks about that is the thing that keeps us from kind of like our full potential. We resist doing the things that we're actually very capable of doing for a wide variety of reasons. That's a great read. Cole Fink, a colleague in Australia, decreasing friction is more effective than increasing willpower. That's absolutely true. Absolutely true. And this one for our business is so true. And I don't know where I first heard it, so I can't give it attribution, but I just love this idea that it's not the market that dictates our success. It simply dictates our strategies. I mean, is that not so true? You're still standing. A lot of people over the last few years have gone on to do something else. And maybe that was the best choice for them, right? And there's no shame in that. But the fact that you're still standing in an industry that's gone through a lot, and maybe you've been in this industry a lot where you've gone through all kinds of cycles and all kinds of upturns and downturns, but you realized over time that it's not the market that matters. All the market does is refine what you're going to do about it, right? Okay, so those are the 5 steps. Now, I do have a bonus one that I wanted to kind of toss in here at the end. It's not really a step, but it is something to think about. And that is, how are you different? What does this have to do with what we're talking about? Because I think the goals that are not only the easiest to achieve, but the goals that ultimately make the biggest difference in our own lives as well as the lives of others are the things that capitalize on our strengths, the goals that capitalize on how we're different. So we want to make sure when we're putting goals and strategies together that we're thinking about what is my secret sauce? Now, if you're not sure, some people honestly, when they're asked that question, what are your gifts? What are your talents? Some people would say, I'm just a person, right? I'm kind of ordinary. There's nothing special about me. Well, first of all, I don't believe that's true. So here's a suggestion. If you don't know what makes you unique, if you don't know what makes you different, capture every compliment. Personally, professionally, anytime somebody says or writes something about you that is a compliment, that is positive, pay attention to what they're saying. You will start to notice trends. You will start to notice things that different people in different parts of your life, they all seem to say this thing about me that's kind of similar. And you'll be surprised because sometimes you would have never come up with this yourself. Like you would have never described yourself the way that other people are describing you. Guess what? That's your brand. No disrespect to the brand, excuse me, the branding professionals out there that teach people how to rebrand themselves. But my thought on branding is that your brand is not what you tell people it is. Your brand is what people tell you it is. Now, if you don't like that and you want to change it, right, then we have to do stuff to change it. But if we listen to what the people that know us and work with us tell us about their experience in working with us, that's what we're all about, whether we think that or not, right? So think about goals in terms of how can you put what makes you into that goal, and you'll have a much greater chance and be much more satisfied in achieving it. That said, this quote I first saw probably 30 years ago. So for much of my adult life, this has been kind of like a mantra that I have thought about, this quote from E. E. Cummings: to be nobody but yourself in a world which is doing its best night and day to make you everybody else means to fight the hardest battle which any human being can fight. Never stop fighting. To be yourself in a world which is trying to make you everybody else, right? Is that not so true? Is this not a message we need to share with young people? On the one hand, younger people, they're trying to be, individuals, be their own person, but yet really, what are they doing? They're conforming. They're trying to be like everybody else because they want to be accepted and they want to be liked. And it's a struggle that I think we all have. But ultimately, satisfaction, success, achievement comes from figuring out who you really are, what makes you special, what makes you different, and building goals around those uniquenesses. So as promised, ideas, right? Not here to tell anybody what to do, not telling you how to do it. I gave you a little bit of structure with those 5 steps, but those are really just recommendations if you think about it. What I've really tried to do is share probably a couple dozen different things that you could think about, knowing that, everybody's going to get a little something different out of this. That's all I had. Unfortunately, I'm actually not finishing late. That's like a miracle for me. I always feel like I've got more to cover than I have time to cover it in. So I'm proud of myself today that I actually finished on time. I'm going to stop the screen share. First of all, thank you for your time and attention on behalf of Arch and Lou, who had to go off to do his own training that he was facilitating in New Hampshire today. He wasn't able to stay for this event, but Lou and I both thank you guys very much. I'm going to turn it back over to Debbie in case there's anything that came up in the chat. And if anybody has anything else they want to say or share, feel free to do that. Debbie, anything that I need to know about, or any final words for you from you before we turn these folks loose?
I think I am all set, except just two things. The first thing is I'm hoping that the rest of you were as inspired as I am on looking at what we're doing and what we can become and changes that we can make. I am so inspired, and I thank you for that. I am recording this, and I will share that recording. And so I would encourage you to share it with your staff if you were as inspired as I was. And I just want to thank Blaine for being part of a very special program today.
Well, thank
Thank
you.
you
Yeah.
for allowing us to offer this for our members.
My pleasure. Really, my pleasure. Obviously, it's something that I feel very strongly about myself. So hopefully I wasn't too preachy in my presentation.
Mhm.
Just strong belief in a lot of what I was sharing. And my hope is that there were ideas that, anybody could have taken at least something out of the presentation. And thank you for recording it, because then it lives on, and other people can, who weren't able to see it today will be able to hear it at their convenience.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right. Well,
And
thanks everybody.
hopefully,
Have a great rest of your week, and good luck in our winter weather that we're all probably hoping will soon depart. We're almost there. So,
absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks,
all
Blaine.
right. Take care.
Thanks.
Appreciate it.
Bye-bye.